Welcome to Stuff You Should Know, a production of iHeartRadio.
Hey, and welcome to the podcast. I'm Josh, and there's Chuck, and Jerry's here too, and this is Stuff You Should Know. The Great Man version of History edition.
Yeah. Great man, except he's... This is a interesting episode because Robert Maxwell was kind of a horrible person in a lot of ways. He achieved a lot of things. He also did a lot of terrible things. So it was interesting. I didn't know much about this guy at all, and I can't remember if I heard about him because he's the father of Ghislaine Maxwell, but
which makes him even worse.
Well, yeah. I mean, yeah. I'm not sure where this came from, though, because this one was like a year and a half ago that we requisitioned the article, and it had just been gathering dust. And so we dusted it off, and now we're going to talk about this this jerk.
Yeah. Great man history, by the way, is it's a way of interpreting history through the leaders, political and social, military leaders, like the people who make history happen rather than society or individual people. The problem is that those great men usually are not great people, personally speaking. And this is a really good example. He was revered because he was super rich, but he was also, I have to say, a very interesting person. I think he was a big liar in a lot of ways, but stuff that he claimed that could be proven was still pretty nuts.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, he was just the broadest overview. He was a tycoon. He was a bully. He escaped Nazi Germany's wrath. He was a decorated British soldier. He was a member of parliament. He was also a crook who stole from the pensions of companies he started, and a lot of like terrible business dealings. It sounds like was a pretty awful husband and father at the same time.
Well, there's the episode.
Well, let's talk about him. He was born Jan Ludwig Hoek in 1923 in Salatvino, which was Czechoslovakia at the time. It's now Ukraine. But he was from he was very poor. He was raised very poor, was from a big family. His father seems like was a pretty awful guy too. So, behind every awful person is usually an awful parent or two,
It's intergenerational.
Yeah, that's the way it generally works.
Yeah. So, and that's why I never had kids.
Oh, no.
He said at one point, I was never young. I never had that privilege. And it was basically because his family was so poverty stricken and his father was such a jerk that he didn't have much of a childhood, but he did remember that he loved his mother like his whole life from childhood on. And he would use her as an example of what his children needed to aspire to, this woman who could handle raising all these kids in these terrible conditions and still, be beloved.
Sure. I mean, suffered from hunger as a child and had some disordered eating as an adult, and that sort of gorging himself on food. And his wife, his later wife, Betty, would say that, she thinks that all came back from the hunger that he had as a child.
Yeah.
He was Jewish. He was from a Jewish family. And like I mentioned earlier, he managed to escape I think kind of the only member of his family to escape the Nazis in March of 1939 when they invaded Czechoslovakia by cutting off his side locks and like getting the heck out of there. And for a lot of his adult life, I don't know if he denied it, but never came forward as being Jewish, like changing his name and everything.
Yeah, he was low-key Jewish for a lot of his life until later on when he was talked into I guess, coming out. I don't know what you would call it in that sense.
Yeah.
But you said that he escaped the Nazi takeover of Czechoslovakia, and he definitely did, but very quickly he turned right around and went back to join the Hungarian underground in Budapest. And he was essentially trying to move people escaping like him further on to safety, because Hungary still wasn't, safety. It was better than being in Czechoslovakia, but you still needed to keep moving, and he was going to help people. And almost immediately he was captured.
Yeah.
And held and tortured as a member of the Czech resistance, which is not what you wanted the Nazis to consider you.
No. Apparently there was going to be no trial at all, and then the French embassy stepped in, and because he had a planned execution, and arranged what seems to be like a sham of a trial.
Sure.
And he ended up escaping like on the way to prison. So, again, a lot of this stuff is from his authorized biography and stories he told, some of which was no doubt like embellished probably. So he seems like one of those guys that would like kind of pump up a story about himself.
Yeah. No, agreed. He's definitely that type for sure.
Yeah.
But he escaped, like you said, literally with his life. He escaped with his life because he would almost certainly have been executed. And he joined the Foreign Legion in France, and they sent him to England because France was overtaken by the Nazis as well. And in England, he basically found a new home. He signed up for the British Army. He was there when Normandy was stormed. And he also displayed like real actual valor, both valor and ruthlessness. Kyle helped us with this, and Kyle really loved to focus on ruthlessness, which in these cases is a synonym for war crimes, cut and dried war crimes.
Yeah, for sure. He really tried to remake himself as a British guy, like pretty successfully. Like I said, he changed his name a couple of times, eventually landing on Ian Robert Maxwell, and like taught himself English, apparently would listen to Churchill speeches. So he would get that sort of that grand English accent that Churchill had.
Sure.
But yeah, he flat out admitted to, he had a real knack for like going undercover and doing like special ops and stuff. But also, like you said, disobeying orders and being pretty ruthless. Like he like admitted to his wife in a letter that he like executed more than one like unarmed German person, including a mayor in Germany.
Yeah, civilian even. Yeah. Yeah, and again, that's a war crime, and he would later be investigated for it. But they were not able to find anyone who could corroborate that. Any witness said, yes, I saw him shoot that mayor, or yes, I saw him shoot those unarmed troops who surrendered. So they had to close the case. So is that a case of him just pumping up his own legend again?
Right.
It's, But again, the stuff that can be verified is kind of amazing. Like he did work for the British intelligence after the war. He ended up being recruited by MI6. It's 6, right? Yeah, MI6. He could speak English, German, French, Yiddish, Hungarian, Czech, and Romanian by the end of the war. So he was extremely valuable post-war while Europe was being divvied up and being rebuilt, and people were having to interact with all these other countries. And he'd also changed his identity 4 times before then, too.
Yeah, but like you said, he legit achieved in the armed forces. He worked his way up eventually to become a second lieutenant in the Queen's Royal Regiment, and had a very apparently daring rescue for a trapped Allied platoon in the Netherlands, and received a military cross, like a Distinguished Service Military Cross. So again, it's sort of a conundrum with this guy, because he did learn all those languages, and he was a very valuable person for MI6 and did some like spy work. But there was also rumors over the years that he was, and we'll get into this a little bit more, but like he spied for the Soviet Union, or that he spied for Israel. And I don't think that anyone knows the real truth behind that stuff.
No, but it is, the more you know about him, the easier it is to believe that that's quite possible,
For sure.
So he made it through the war quite successfully. He was stationed in Berlin, I think, at the end of it. He was interviewing German prisoners of war to get as much intelligence out of them as possible.
Yeah.
And so while there, he was also in the chaos of all of this, of Europe being devastated and just beginning to rebuild. There was a lot of money to be made. It's like in that Spike Lee movie, The Inside Man.
Yeah,
where they
seen that.
Oh, my goodness.
And that's like one of the better later Spike Lees, I know.
Yeah, it's one of the better, like, just suspense movies, too. It's really well done. Great movie. Please see it. But anyway, in one part, Christopher Plummer says, when there's blood on the street, buy real estate. And that was essentially what Europe was like at this time. And Robert Maxwell was exactly the kind of person to buy real estate when there was blood on the street. So he was making all sorts of money on the side, just taking advantage of the desperation of the people who he was interacting with. And in addition, like, other business opportunities came up, and improbably, if you ask me, he ended up in the scientific publishing world.
Yeah.
And became essentially like a scientific publishing magnate in the coming decades.
Yeah. So while he was in Berlin, he was working with Der Telegraph, and that paper was owned by Springer Verlag, two words with a dash in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
I think Verlag was a big academic publisher, which is kind of like you mentioned where we were headed with this. He met the publisher, Ferdinand Springer,
mm-hmm.
and he learned that there were more than 60,000 books and journals stockpiled in a warehouse. And they had been, away from public view since 1939,
mm-hmm.
pre-war.
Mm-hmm.
And so his wheels started turning on how he could make some money. And then along with his eventual business partner, this guy named Paul Rosbaud, started a company, bought his way into a company called Butterworth Springer,
mm-hmm.
which was rebranded Pergamon Press. And they got a deal with Springer Verlag to get these books, like these scientific textbooks, out into the world. And he got MI6 to finance this deal.
Yeah. Yeah. They basically paid for 300 tons. Yeah, 300 tons of books and journals to be shipped to London so that they could be translated and then published for money, like you said. And they also, he said, I want to buy some shares in the company too. So they gave him 25,000 pounds. And I did some back of the envelope work.
Oh boy.
West Egg.
You're not going to call it maths, are you?
No, not. I wouldn't even dare. But that is about $885,000 US today.
Yeah. And if you're wondering, how did he get MI6? Why would they secretly invest in something like this?
Mm-hmm.
I think everything we're about to say, the guy, take at face value. But one thing he was really good at was he could be very charming. He was kind of a Jekyll and Hyde from what I saw. So as awful as he could be, he could also be super charming and work his way into a room or work his way into a deal.
Right.
And I think that's what he did with MI6 when he basically was like, hey, having all these German scientific research books is like an asset to us, an intelligence asset, maybe a propaganda tool, and
mm-hmm.
MI6 bought it.
Yeah. So we'll put his role in academic publishing to the side, but just suffice to say that the current state of affairs, where journals determine what science is conducted and the scientific community as a whole has kind of shied away or moved away from doing its job the way it should be, and instead conducting experiments and studies that will get published that are eye-popping.
Right.
That actually came from Robert Maxwell and the way that he changed the industry.
Oh, interesting.
And there's a really good long-form Guardian article from 2017 called "Is the Staggeringly Profitable Business of Scientific Publishing Bad for Science?" And you can guess that the answer is yes. But it talks a lot about this and other stuff too. But it's a good article. I'd say go read that if you're interested.
All right. I'll check it out.
Okay.
Should we take a break?
Yeah.
All right. I'll go read the article right now. We'll be back in, 20 minutes or so?
Sure.
All right. Be right back.
So one of the things about Maxwell was when he got into scientific publishing, he really went full bore into it. And his whole jam with business was buy one thing and then use it to buy another thing, start another thing. Basically get into one industry and just mushroom everywhere you can, because the more stuff you have, the more money you can soak up in that industry or that sector, right? So he bought another publisher, Simkin Marshall. And this is a really good demonstration of his business techniques. He bought it with a loan from a business partner. The business partner came back and was like, "Hey, how's Simkin Marshall doing?" And Maxwell was like, "I'm not I'm not at liberty to say. And the guy found out that the company was severely in debt, and Maxwell had borrowed a ton of money against the company's credit, and then sold off all the assets and kept the money for himself. And this publishing house, which had been around for more than a century, went under thanks to Robert Maxwell raiding it. And it was essentially a proto-private equity move that he did. That's what private equity does. Chuck, have you been to Dunkin' Donuts lately?
No, I don't go there.
Yeah, I don't normally either, but I went and got a coffee, and I walked in and I was like, God, this place is it's like a death march in here. This is awful. Like the employees hated their life. Like stuff was broken. Like a serve yourself machine was there next to the cash register. It was just terrible. And I was like, I'll bet private equity owns this now. And sure enough, 2 years ago, private equity bought it. Yep. They do it. Like anytime you are in, like you work with a business or you like a store or something like that, and it suddenly goes downhill, go online and search that business in private equity. And I guarantee you private equity got involved and is just running it into the ground because they don't care.
So he was doing something like this in the 1950s.
Yep.
Which is crazy. And it seemed like, a lot of time he was definitely not afraid to burn bridges because apparently he didn't even repay that loan to the guy who loaned him the money for Simkin Marshall.
Right.
There was a rag called Private Eye that called him the bouncing Czech, as in Czechoslovakian. So he definitely had a reputation of, just doing what he could by hook or crook to get something done and then like walking away and leaving people penniless behind him. That Springer Verlag, who got him that first deal, they ended up severing contact with him in 1958. Pergamon Press, he lost control of, would eventually take it back. But during a 1971 Board of Trade inquiry, they declared he was unfit to run a public company. So like his reputation was well known even back then.
Yeah. I mean, that's a big deal when the government says you can't be a CEO. Sorry. The board says you can. We're saying you cannot because you are that untrustworthy.
Yeah, for sure. And later in life, well, not that much later, he would find an enemy, a grave enemy in the 1960s with an Australian named Rupert Murdoch. So we talked about Murdoch in our episode on the news cycle.
24-hour cable news.
Yeah, 24-hour cable news. So everyone knows who Rupert Murdoch is at Fox News. He and Maxwell were grave enemies, and it seems like Maxwell was pretty much obsessed with trying to outdo him. Like anytime he would go to buy a newspaper, Murdoch seemed to be right there in front of him buying it. And he ended up buying the left-wing, Maxwell did, the left-wing Daily Mirror just to counter Murdoch's right-wing buys. Like by all accounts, Maxwell was never, even though he would eventually be in Parliament as the Labour Party, like he said that he was conservative, but he wasn't part of the conservative establishment. So he would just be like, all right, I'm part of the Labour Party, or I'll buy this left-wing newspaper.
Yeah. I mean, it just made sense financially. So, he could be whatever he needed to be, I guess, in that sense. It kind of demonstrates that to me. I was reading about Rupert Murdoch and him, their rivalry. And apparently it was one of those rivalries like where it meant everything to Robert Maxwell. And Rupert Murdoch was like, who? Oh, yeah, I remember him, whatever. And that just drove Robert Maxwell crazier and crazier and just made him want to, compete with Rupert Murdoch. Like Rupert Murdoch wasn't really competing. And he would just buy paper after paper. Like they would be directly competing trying to buy a newspaper, but Murdoch most of the time won. And he said later on that his impression of Robert Maxwell is that he was a total buffoon, really. Like he was just this boastful guy who wanted to win, but would get in his own way in the process of winning. That was kind of what his personality was like. And by kind of, I mean 100%.
Yeah. Murdoch, they talked about the Max Factor, a play on the, what was that, like a makeup or something?
Yeah. I think
Max
there's
Factor.
like a makeup line. Yeah. Max Factor.
Yeah. But they would use that as not a compliment. Like the Max Factor wasn't like, hey, this guy's great. He can go in and close deals. It was more like he loses out on deals because of the Max factor, because no one wants to deal with this guy.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, like, people got in bed with him because they had no choice. He had just bought their company. He was now their boss. People didn't get into bed or business, I guess I should probably say, with him because they liked him or they wanted to. They just found themselves in the unfortunate situation of having to work closely with him.
Yeah, for sure. But he bought the Daily Mirror in 84. He started the London Daily News in 87. He started another paper that was sort of what I understand is like a European USA Today called European in 1990. Mm-hmm. So he's launching all these newspapers. And then eventually he says, all right, I need to look toward the States, and ends up buying Macmillan U.S. in 1988 for $2.6 billion.
So much money in 1988.
Oh, totally. And something called the Official Aviation Guide for $750 million.
Which, again, that's a crazy amount of money in 1988. So this spending spree, especially in the U.S., where he's trying to take on Murdoch again. I think Murdoch had already bought the New York Post by this time. It was a lot like the USSR being driven to extinction by spending, the U.S. spending,
right.
And having to keep up with spending.
Yeah.
Rupert Murdoch would go do something, and now he was in the United States, so now Robert Maxwell had to do it, and Robert Maxwell had to outdo him, so he started spending money he didn't have and was expanding his empire, and his empire started to lose its foundation. It started to crumble financially because of him trying to keep up, essentially.
Yeah, that's a great analogy, actually. In February 91, he bought the New York Daily News, and that's one where Murdoch kind of rubbed it in his face, because as soon as Maxwell bought it, he was like, all right, the publisher needs to call Rupert Murdoch and tell him that Robert Maxwell just bought the New York Daily News. And apparently Murdoch laughed at this and said, yeah, thank Bob for the courtesy of that. Basically, I didn't want that failing paper anyway.
Sure. There's one other thing that he very famously lost out on, and we must have talked about him in our episode on Tetris, The Wild History of Tetris.
Oh, yeah.
2024, I think is how weird people put it. He owned Mirrorsoft at the time, and Mirrorsoft had Tetris in their hands, and just through a series of miscommunications and bad deals, lost it. And had they had Tetris, who knows what that would be, because they were already a powerhouse in video games, especially in the UK. And if they had continued owning Tetris, they might still be around, but because they lost it under Maxwell, it's just another huge black eye on his reputation as a businessman.
Yeah, for sure. So I mentioned politics early on in Parliament, and that he was a conservative human in his heart, but because he wasn't part of that establishment, he was like, all right, I'll go to the Labour Party. And that's what he did. He became a Labour Party member of Parliament from 64 to 70. And he was like, he's one of these politicians kind of say whatever just to get in there. And he was like, you know what? I came from a farm laborer's background, and I had no money. So I'm basically a socialist, even though he was the farthest thing from that in reality. Yeah. And was they called him the biggest gas bag in the Commons. He was not well liked within the House, the walls of Parliament. Apparently no one liked working with him. There were a lot of rumors floating around about various improprieties. There was one rumor that he sold part of the Palace of Westminster's wine cellar to an anonymous buyer for way less than what it was worth. I didn't see if that was really true, but point is, no one liked him in Parliament, apparently.
No, and it's believable. You wouldn't put it past him. That's just his reputation, right?
Yeah, but I mean, he won election and re-election.
Yeah. Apparently, right before his election, he was arrested shaving the day before while he was driving 90 miles an hour.
Shaving while driving?
Yeah.
An SUI?
Yeah.
Or no, I guess it would be a DUS.
I guess.
No, DWS, driving while shaving. Good Lord.
There you go.
God, it took me a while.
Should we take a break and then come back and talk about that Max factor?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, we're going to do that, guys.
All right, more promise of talking about the Max Factor, which was not a compliment for this guy. I mentioned early on that he was a bit of a bully. Apparently, he was well known for just sort of his atrocious behavior. There was a Daily Mirror editor named Roy Greensdale who said when they were first met at this restaurant, he walked in, Maxwell, and just swept everything off the table, all the cutlery, saying it wasn't laid out correctly. And apparently he had done that more than once. He would bring his kids into work and belittle and lecture the staff to impress his kids. He would fire people while they were on vacation. He would leave the door to this bathroom open. Apparently he would urinate off the top of the building. Just real boorish behavior.
Yeah, at the same time, though, he's cultivating this English gentleman persona.
Shtick. Yeah.
Which was very much encapsulated by his accent. He didn't sound anything like someone who was born and raised in Czechoslovakia.
No, not at all.
No, he was being elected as a member of parliament, it's pretty good for your reputation. We know so much about him now and what he did throughout his life.
Yeah.
His image now is not what his image was when he was, alive and working in parliament and doing all that stuff. I think people who worked closely with him knew what he was like. Yeah. But I think in general, he was just kind of viewed as this larger than life personality by the public who knew about him.
Yeah, I think so. But yeah, he was a blowhard. He would do things if someone walked into his office, he would say give me the White House on the phone, and then apparently just have a fake conversation on the telephone to the White House.
That's what insane people do.
Yeah. I mean, I only do that if I'm trying to avoid somebody in public.
Sure. You even make the dialing sound beep, boop, 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 beep.
I do. I got a call. Sorry. He was not a good father and husband, like I mentioned earlier. He lived in this huge mansion called Headington Hill Hall, which was leased from the Oxford City Council. Mm-hmm. And apparently was he would, at dinner time, he would assign his children topics that they had to impress him with, and he would judge them. Mm-hmm. Apparently there was physical abuse. He cheated on his wife time and time again. Mm-hmm. His wife described him as bullying, but would also take up for him at times,
Yeah, she set the bar pretty low. She said he was no degenerate monster.
Right. Right.
He was also famous for he gave her 6 rules for basically getting along in a lasting partnership. And it depends on how you look at it. You could look at it like he's a domineering bully who was, making his wife adhere to these rules that he was laying down. But if you read all the rules, these are actually pretty good, sensible rules for maintaining a partnership that if both people honor it, then you've got something good. If it's just one person, then you've got a problem.
Yeah, I got the impression it was, here are your 6 rules that you need to do to stay married to me.
I wouldn't put it past him.
Yeah, I mean, we'll go over them real quick, but in the context of this is what you need to do and not this is what I pledged to do for you.
Right.
Number 1, don't nag. Because I love that's his number 1. Mm-hmm. Number 2, don't criticize unduly. Number 3, give honest appreciation. Number 4, pay little attentions. That's sweet. Mm-hmm. To me is what he was saying.
Right.
Number 5, be courteous to me. Mm-hmm. And then number 6, have the utmost confidence in yourself and me.
Yeah, I mean, really, if 2 people come at a relationship like that, observing those 6, I guess, rules or guidelines or whatever, I think that's kind of good. But yes, I'm quite sure you're right that he was here's what you need to do for me.
Yeah, for sure.
And he used it against her, too. He said, don't nag me about me doing these rules. That's rule number 1.
That's right. That's right. You don't talk about Fight Club.
He got her with the legal mumbo jumbo.
He had, quite a few kids. He lost, very sadly, a couple of them. He lost a daughter, Corinne, of leukemia at age 3, and he had a son named Michael that died at age 21 after being in a coma after a car crash. Mm-hmm. It seemed like the little apple of his eye was young Ghislaine. He named his yacht after her, Lady Ghislaine. And even though she had a hard time impressing him at times, it seems like.
Yeah, supposedly she put herself on his radar at age 3 when she went and presented herself in front of her mom and said, "Mommy, I exist."
Yeah.
As a 3-year-old, and I guess that really captured Robert Maxwell's attention. And from that point on, she was very clearly his favorite.
Yeah.
But yeah, even still, I don't think like it seems like he would still berate her at the drop of a hat or something like that. He just maybe did it slightly less than he did to others, or maybe he didn't beat her. I'm not sure, but everyone knew that she was the favorite. Although when it came to business, it was his 2 sons that he brought into business with him, not his daughter, not his wife. And when he died, his philosophy was that you didn't leave your estate to a woman. So he didn't leave anything to Ghislaine. He didn't leave anything to his wife. He left it all to his sons. In this case, that turned out to be quite a bit of baggage, not anything good.
Yeah, we'll get to that. So he died under shady circumstances. So we're going to talk a little bit about his death and then sort of everything that was happening to him at that time, which leads people to speculate, like, was it suicide? Was it murder? Or was it an accident? But on November... Well, he did have the Max factor. On November 5th, 1991, when he was 68, he fell to his death from his yacht, his 15 million pound Lady Ghislaine. And he had, earlier that year, he had sailed into Manhattan to buy the New York Daily News. That's what I mentioned was 1991. Mm-hmm. And then in the fall, he sort of spur of the moment trip to the Canary Islands where, looking back, crew members were like, it was weird in that he showed up by himself, which was unusual. Didn't have like his a butler or his like people, like his caretakers. And they said he also seemed like in really good spirits, which was sort of unusual. And he didn't work while he was on board, which was super unusual.
Yeah. And so he was essentially getting away from his world collapsing in on him.
Yeah.
He said that he needed to go do something, I think, but there was no one who was fooled. Like he was just trying to get away from things. That's especially kind of signaled by the fact that he didn't work. Apparently there was no line between his private life and his business life. So he was always working, right?
Yeah. And, when you were talking about business collapsing, like, financial failures, but also sort of his schemes, like, the walls closing in on his schemes. Like you mentioned, he was basically raiding his companies for profit. A lot of the times from the pension funds, I think it ended up being close to 500 million pounds from pension funds.
You do not do that, man.
No. And he was, at the same time, he was selling Pergamon. He was secretly buying shares in his companies to prop up stock prices, like while he was trying to rid himself of these things.
Yeah, he was in a really bad spot because a bunch of factors basically came together to have all of his creditors basically call in all his debts at once, right?
Yeah.
And he had used those pension funds as collateral, that's on Lehman Brothers, that's on Goldman Sachs. Like you should not take pension funds as collateral, even if, and he was fully legally in charge of those pension funds. So he legally could do that. But just being a banker like that and knowing the look, the optics of being like, yep, give us those pension funds because we're calling in a debt you can't repay. Of course, that's just a terrible collateral to take. That's neither here nor there as far as Robert Maxwell's concerned. The other bankers, though, that held shares in his companies, they were threatening to basically say, we're going to sell these shares that you gave us as collateral. We're going to dump them on the market all at once. And that's going to drive your stock prices down even further, which is going to mean you have even less money to repay us.
Yeah.
So he's getting it from every which way. And then not to mention, they didn't know about the pension rating until after he was dead. So it was not like people were beating the drum. That anticipation was hanging over him as well.
Yeah, for sure. He, seemed to be in a pretty paranoid state. He had his offices and businesses bugged. Apparently, he had his own house bugged, so he could hear what his family was saying about him.
It's nuts.
And then there was this other sort of wall closing in on him, and that there were allegations that he was a spy for Israel. He had invested at one point, I think, about 250 million pounds in just various Israeli companies.
Mm-hmm.
And in 1991, there was a guy claiming to be a former intelligence officer for Israel named Ari Ben Menashe, who told the news that Maxwell and one of his editors that was working with him at one of his papers were Israeli agents.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently in 1986, there was a nuclear scientist named Mordecai Vanunu who went to London as like a whistleblower.
Yeah.
Saying that like there's a dangerous nuclear arms program happening in Israel, and he was going to blow the lid off of it and sell it to the Sunday Times. And Maxwell convinced him to sell it to him instead, to the Mirror. He ends up sending that information to Israel as supposedly like to fact check it and confirm it. But he ended up stiffing Vanunu for the money and never ran the story.
Yeah, that's a technique that billionaire tyrants who own news organs do. They'll it's like catch and kill. Yeah, or you buy the story, you buy the exclusive rights to the story, and then you don't publish it. You just sit on it to keep the public from knowing about it.
Yeah, I mean, that's what happened in this country. Remember?
Happens a lot. It's really messed up.
And as far as Vanunu, he was later drugged and kidnapped and jailed for 18 years in Israel.
Right. So Maxwell was like, I'm not an Israeli spy. This is all just BS. And then Seymour Hersh flew in with a book. And in the book, it wasn't just about Maxwell, but he's tangentially in the book. And Seymour Hersh was like, yeah, that's all true. Seymour Hersh is one of the most indisputable journalists of all time. If he says something is true, he has done so much research on it that he'll stand behind it every time. And most of the time it is, if not every time, it's quite true. So he said that, yes, this guy was an Israeli spy all this time, that he was a businessman too. And it got brought up in Parliament. In Great Britain, their libel laws are very heavy against the papers, and for good reason. So the papers tend to kind of stay in line about even talking about rumors like that. But once it was brought up in Parliament, now the papers could report on Parliament mentioning it and dig into it, and they could report on it without any fear of libel. So this is going on at the same time too.
All right. So yeah, walls are closing in, financially, professionally, politically, I guess, and this, whole spy allegation business. So he falls off this yacht, supposedly. His last words at 4:45 a.m. were complaining to the bridge crew about how the temperature in his cabin. And apparently, this guy liked peeing off of things, because apparently he went to pee off the back of the boat, which they said was like a normal thing for him to do, and then fell over a low rail. And this was not the yacht where you're falling from like 6 stories up. It's like it was a yacht, but it wasn't like he was falling from 100 feet or something like that.
Right.
So it was like a low fall, and pathologists, like, no one's ever agreed on what happened to him. Pathologists failed to agree on anything besides he drowned. Some people said he had a heart attack first. Some said that, no, he actually tore his arm muscles.
Oh, man.
So he was clearly trying to hold on, so it wasn't suicide. They ended up finding his naked body floating about 15 miles away, I think maybe in the next day or two. And the whole thing was like, did he fall? Did he jump? Or is it possible he was murdered? Has been sort of the question since then.
Yeah, and I think the reason why he drowned was because the ship was cruising at the time. So without anyone knowing that he'd fallen over, he was in the middle of nowhere by the time that ship realized that he was gone hours later, right?
Yeah.
So let's start with these, Chuck. Let's start with suicide. You said, I think, what kind of convinces most people is he clearly, on his way down, tried to grab onto the rail and pulled tore the muscles on his side. I can barely say it. It just sounds so painful. So he wanted to live, right? And also it wasn't a high jump in the first place. So suicide probably wasn't it. Some people who or some of his biographies even were like, he would not have done well with all the public attention that was about to be unleashed on him. His reputation was about to be completely ruined. Financially, he was about to be completely ruined. So, yeah, suicide makes sense. But again, that torn arm muscles basically say, no, that's just not what this was.
Yeah. And, his family has always said it was an accident. I think beyond the arm muscles, I think they're knowing him. I think his wife said it just wasn't in his character.
Right.
They thought he was just the kind of guy that would never give up, even if facing all of this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
He would still try and fight his way or buy his way or get loans to get out of this stuff. Most of his family, I think, and closest people were convinced it was just an accident. There was one pathologist who argued against suicide because of the arm thing for sure, or the fact that he was naked. That seemed a little strange, I think, to them as well.
Mm-hmm. So accident seems pretty prominent,
likely.
Right?
Yeah.
There's also assassination. Remember, Israel was supposedly being outed as having used him as a spy for years and years and years. That wasn't enough to fuel that rumor of Israel killing him. What the rumor was is that he had asked Israel for a loan, and Israel said no. And he said, well, you know what? I'm going to go tell everybody about me being a spy for you. And they were like, no, You're not. We're going to rub you out. That's basically when people say he was murdered, that's usually what they point to.
Yeah, and there was some, the initial pathologist, I think, had speculated that his body was dead longer than it was in the water. Mm-hmm. So that kind of spurred a little bit of speculation about murder. But apparently the crew of the Lady Ghislaine was like, no one was on board that wasn't authorized. No one could have climbed aboard that we wouldn't have known about. Ken Lennox was a guy who knew him, said he saw the corpse and it wasn't, it didn't have any markings of struggle or gunshot or throat cut or anything like that.
Right. There's also a theory that he faked his death, which is quite possible, but he was pretty recognizable. So it would have been difficult for him to start a new life somewhere without, completely changing his face, at least, and his voice.
Yeah, and I think that's one of those things where they said, well, he had mentioned it before.
Right.
I think he was one of those guys that would just muse about something like that.
Yeah. And if you, listener, were just fake your death, I'd love to hear more about that. Well, we did an episode on faking your death you can go look up too.
Oh, God. That was early on, wasn't it?
No, that was a year or two ago.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
What am I thinking of then?
Going over Niagara Falls in a barrel?
Oh, man, that was a long time
There
ago.
was a worst way to die. That's probably what you're thinking of.
Oh, maybe so. Either way, you mentioned earlier that he sort of did his wife and daughter a favor by not leaving them the business because the business was, I think it was the largest, may still be the largest bankruptcy in Britain's history.
Yeah.
Debts of well over 400 million pounds that they were initially on the hook for. They were, I think, prosecuted for fraud as well in 1996, but they both successfully defended themselves, and the pensioners were eventually bailed out by public funds, apparently.
Yeah.
They got their money back.
They got half, basically 50 cents on the dollar. So they still lost out, but at least they weren't just completely screwed, which is cool of the UK to swoop in and do that, It was
That's right.
means everybody in Great Britain chipped in so those people wouldn't just completely lose their pension. That's pretty neat.
Yeah.
So, before Ghislaine Maxwell came along and tarnished her family's reputation, it had already been well tarnished by the time that rolled around. Her father's death was this is his reputation just completely went downhill. How about that?
Yeah, totally.
Ghislaine Maxwell, that's a whole other episode if you ask me.
Ooh, man. Are we going to do that one day?
Someday.
Okay.
Okay. If you want to know more about Robert Maxwell in the meantime, there's all sorts of interesting articles about him, too. There's documentaries. The House of Maxwell, I think, was a good BBC one from a few years ago. And since I ended this an old school How Stuff Works episode, it's time for listener mail.
This is about the tobacco settlements episode. Hey, guys, I wanted to provide some more info about one of the points of confusion you had. I worked for years doing health policy work for the Minnesota House, and this source of funds was a hot topic as we were discussing other policies to target the rise in youth tobacco use. Josh, you were asking about how the settlements worked with regard to tobacco companies paying in perpetuity while also having a specific settlement amount. For background, Minnesota agreed to about $6.5 billion in settlement funds. We were not part of the master settlement. It's actually pretty simple. That $6.5 billion number was an estimate of the settlement's value at the time of the settlement, not a cap on how much companies would pay.
Oh, cool.
So Minnesota received a series of one-time payments targeted at specific tobacco cessation and public health uses, but we also receive an annual payment each year that can be used for basically whatever the state wants. These annual payments are the ongoing payments that are based on a formula around tobacco sales and profitability that you touched on in the episode. In Minnesota, these annual payments are about $150 million each year, and when counting everything the state has gotten from the tobacco companies so far, we've received something like $5.7 billion so far.
Wow.
Hope it provides some clarity, and that is from Jeremiah Wingstead.
Man, that's so awesome. I love hearing from people who are there.
Yeah.
You know?
And who actually know the stuff.
Yeah.
And we can always count on that almost.
Yeah, that's so cool. And also big ups to Minnesota because they were the ones who, as part of the settlement, required the tobacco companies to make their documents public.
That's right.
Thanks a lot, Jeremiah. If you were there, no matter what we were talking about, we want to hear from you. And even if you weren't, that's fine too. We always like to hear a hello from our listeners. You can send us an email. Wrap it up, spank it on the bottom, and send it off to stuffpodcast@iHeartRadio.com.
Stuff You Should Know is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.